Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where our purpose is to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve your organization sustainably. Learn how to achieve and sustain an excellence journey for yourself, others, and the planet.
And I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. We are proudly brought to you in association with SA Partners, a world-leading business transformation consultancy. SA Partners are a truly purposeful company focused on helping organisations achieve sustainable improvement for themselves, others, and the planet. Welcome to episode 59 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. It is such a pleasure to have Mr. Bruce Hamilton back on the show with us today. Bruce has created some of the most engaging, knowledge-transferring content I've ever come across in Lean, one of the best being Toast Kaizen. In this episode, we chat about the importance of thinking longer term and bigger picture, and supporting the journey with visionary leadership. I encourage you to listen to episode 58 before this one if you haven't already. In a nutshell, we spoke about TPS and how that is enabled or not enabled within an organisation. Bruce has many entertaining stories about Norman Bowditch and the history of Routledge and Productivity Press. He talks about the connection with Shingo. Bruce also covers a lot on Eli Goldratt and the work he's done with theory of constraints, and especially his work with Mr. Oba and Kaizen. We covered the importance of management to get out on the floor, out to the front line and see what's happening, measuring time, and is training a waste of time? We looked at visionary leadership. Let's get into the episode. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us today. Picking up from where we left off last week, I really think that the crazy thing is that everyone spends a lot of time at work. The level of pressure and stress that short-term thinking at every level of the business can bring is immense. And then you throw in firefighting and all that goes with it. You know, a lot of people spend a lot of time in these stressful whirlwinds of days. Bruce, what have you seen? Have you seen an organisation break out of it? And what would you say was the key thing that helped them break out of the whirlwind?
So it's pretty much what we've been talking about. I think, at one point I was kind of hopeful that, over time, there'll be people maybe in junior leadership roles who kind of have an understanding of the managerial side of Lean, and they'll rise in the organization. That's happening awfully slowly. I see examples of that. But at the same time, it's like, the flywheel's spinning 100 miles an hour or 100 kilometers per hour in the wrong direction. You get everything running the wrong way. And then you have some persons who are trying to get that flywheel headed in the right direction. Some of them, I think there are just some persons who have the ability to, there's the analogy of standing on a balcony, seeing the whole thing, seeing all the politics, all the worries, and they're not treating any of this as a technical problem. They're treating it as a big organizational behavior problem, trying to figure out how do we get those people who are fighting to see that they're actually on the same team. Yeah. And those leaders, if they then happen to also have the good fortune of having, the technical part of TPS at their disposal, they make a difference. And there are examples of that in all businesses, but there are far too few.
Yeah.
Far too few.
Bruce, one thing that comes to mind that is only one element of it, okay? I'm only talking one element of Jeff Bezos with Amazon, but I remember seeing reports come out in the early days with Bezos and Amazon where he's basically telling the share market, this is going to be a longer ride. Here's my vision. We're not going to be making money for a long time, but here's where we're going. Now, I don't know. I know they're more of an agile organization, which is built off of Lean. It's agile. Yeah. Scrums come from Lean. But is that what you're talking about, that leader that will stand up and take that longer view and help the organization navigate?
Yeah, so I'm not a total fan of Jeff Bezos. He's not a perfect individual. But yes, I'd say, look, Bezos is, he made the point a while back that when he was just selling books, and I admit, I'm probably one of those people who looked at it and said, why do I want to buy a book online? I can just go down to Barnes and Noble and get them when I want them. So I did not have that vision, but he had an idea, okay? And that idea was that they were, so he started to get some take up And publishers suggested, people would write in comments, about the books. Publishers recommended to him, I'm just sort of telling his story, that maybe, you ought to kind of downplay those negative ratings because you'll sell more books that way. And he said, yeah, you misunderstand. I'm not in the business of selling books. I'm in the business of making recommendations, of sharing best. And so if I say that a bad book is good, yeah, I may sell more books in the short term, but I won't be successful. So his idea was different, and nobody got that, I think, right off, except Jeff Bezos. And I don't know when that came to him, but it's a brilliant idea. Now, also, he was enabled by a technology which, could never have done that, without the technology. But that's often the story with technology successes, is that somebody figured out how to actually make it work. There's an awful lot of organizations out there that do things with IT or with the internet, but they're not very impactful. They don't do much. It's just the same old thing. It's automated.
No, he certainly had
sort of like that.
Yeah, in that element of visionary, it was a path there, wasn't it? Bruce, I've got, with our episode 2, we do provide our Enterprise Excellence 2-minute tip, which is like a 2-minute insight of, what would be that insight that you'd provide to listeners that you'd say, this is something we can focus on to really help try and make a difference? What would be that 2-minute tip you'd give listeners?
Well, there's a quote from Eli Goldratt, think globally and act locally, that's always on my mind. If you kind of look at that time frame, we arbitrarily have divided a continuum into buckets, seconds, minutes, hours, weeks, months, and so on. And somewhere there's this long-term view, and that's distant. So where do we focus? We're right here in the present. We're always focusing on the present. What are we doing today? And yeah, it's out there somewhere. So our actions are never, or not often enough, based upon that big picture. And I think we would all be better off if we were doing that. We wouldn't be having these awful news stories about the environment and those worries if we were thinking out in the future, but then doing something about it every day. So everybody every day, that's the slogan of our organization. You gotta do something every day, and you learn that way. Yeah,
that's a great 2-minute tip, Bruce. Bruce, if I had $1 for the amount of times I'm hearing theory of constraints and Eli Goldratt mentioned, or Toyota Carter with Mike Rother, I would be a wealthy man right now. It's still such a massive, great book and great approach, isn't it? The way that he wrote that.
Yeah, Eli Goldratt he was another guy who never spent a day in manufacturing. And, that's where I started. It was before I ever knew about TPS. I was in an IT department, and he was selling a piece of software called OPT, Optimized Production Technology.
Wow.
And I went down to Connecticut to where he was at the time, and took lessons in this optimized production technology, which was a computer system that would kind of schedule around bottlenecks. That was the basic idea. And I came away with the idea that, in order for that software to work, your business would have to be so much under control that you probably wouldn't need the software. So I never used the software, but the ideas, that idea of the bottleneck and the constraint and changing the constraint, and the theory, it wasn't even a theory of constraints. It was just, he was selling this software, but then I think he realized the concepts were much more important than a software product. Yeah. So Eli Goldratt, another brilliant guy who left us too soon. He shouldn't have been such a heavy smoker. It was his undoing. So that's where I started. I liked his book so much that I went out. I was his biggest customer in 1986. I bought 450 copies of his book, one for every employee in our company. And it's because I wanted us to, he had the ability to, Alex Rogo sitting up there on the hill, people could identify with that exasperation that you can't seem to do anything right. So it wasn't just about, constraints. It was about the struggle that people have. And so that's where we started. Before we ever knew about TPS was Eli Goldratt. And I've noted other people have done the same. Yeah, some good thinking there.
Yeah. Bruce, there's a correlation there because just like, Eli Goldratt created a story, an enjoyable piece of content with that book, which was your approach too. You created Toast Kaizen and more content throughout your career and everything you've done that is educational, but also enjoyable. There has to be something in that if it's enjoyable and people get a laugh and or can relate to it, there's learning that happens.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe that's something I learned from Eli Goldratt. I don't know. I don't know if he was. That probably was his intent. Yeah, good point.
Oh, Bruce, I appreciate the insights and the learning from yourself and just the career you've had so far and continue to have. Bruce, what insights have you had recently that has been a recent learning for you? What's been a recent insight there?
Well, I've shared a couple of them with you, and a lot of them kind of come out of the past 18 months. One of them is that, we react to a crisis, but crises are finite. Once the crisis is over, we settle back into, whatever we did before. That's a problem. Then that's when companies talk a lot about that. How do we get beyond that? That's where I think the visionary leader is important, without some continuing sense of urgency. In other words, there's no perpetual motion machine. You got to always be finding something more. And companies that are successful with this always have that in mind. That idea of seeking perfection, as Toyota says, it just never ends. You got to do that. So I worry with the pandemic that, what lessons are we actually going to learn from this? Same thing with lean. Oftentimes companies do very well. Crisis is over, and now it's back to business as usual.
Go to enterpriseexcellencepodcast.com/downloads to download an Enterprise Excellence Big Picture Map, which will allow you to analyze your organization's systems in line with your longer-term vision, meaningful goals, culture, and customers. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast to help others gain insights and create a better future. Let's get back into the episode.
When I say adaptive, it means that we have this whole organizational framework, people with, their own wants and fears and needs, and the way the organization is set up, kind of natural enemies and allies within inside an organization. And if you're not addressing that problem, you're actually not really going to make any long-term success of TPS. That's when Mr. Shingo said when Mr. Oba said management does not know what TPS is. That's what he was talking about.
Yeah, those systems, structures, hierarchies, all that element just working against any type of continuous improvement culture.
It is. And it's very hard to make a change. Mr. Shingo made the same point. There's a really great book, not a lean book, called Leadership on the Line, which makes this case. That this type of adaptive change, you can't order people to do it. You can try, but it doesn't work. So you hear the same thing, like the idea of lead as though you had no authority. That's what we're talking about there. Like, you can tell people what to do, but that doesn't actually change their thinking or their behavior. That when it's the facts are one thing and beliefs are another. And if people believe something, Mr. Shingo made a big deal out of this in several of his books too. He said you have to persuade. Persuasion is the tool. And so a lot of his writing was about how do you, rather than getting into this kind of thing where you're fighting sides, listen to the other person, try to create a dialogue and persuade. That's ultimately how change occurs. And that I see that certainly in play right now with this pandemic, but it's also true. It's certainly true in the work that I've done and continue to do, that it doesn't really matter what you think ultimately. Communication is in the ear of the beholder. Gotta remember that. And so tough sometimes.
Well, Bruce, thank you so much for your wisdom and, sharing the amazing career you've had and continue to have. Bruce, if people want to reach out to you and connect and learn more or, engage to get support, how can they do that?
Well, certainly, our website, www.gbmp, is kind of where I can be reached. I do a webinar once a month. It's called Tea Time with the Toast Dude. Somebody in our office made a joke about that. That's where it came from. And I also have a blog called Old Lean Dude, also kind of a joke. And I do that about once a month as well. If I can make one more plug, Brisbane, incidentally, Brisbane was one of my favorite places in Australia. It was
great.
It was a great place. And the weather was so nice. I mean, it was hot, but it was gorgeous. So you're kind of far away, but we have I think, fingers crossed, an in-person conference coming up in October 6 and 7. And that you'll see that through our website. This is our 17th year. Last year, of course, we couldn't do anything in person and don't know about this year yet. But at least in this portion of the U.S., we're kind of listening to the science. And so hope springs eternal that we'll make it across the finish line with that conference. And if there's anybody listening to you from across the ocean closer to us, or we will be live streaming as well. If somebody wants to sign on, please attend. So there's many ways you can get in touch with me.
Thanks, Bruce. I'll be definitely going and signing up to that one. And thank you so much, Bruce. I really appreciate you sharing knowledge and helping us create a better future as you always have. Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, Brad. Have a good day or evening. Morning.
Morning. Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, morning. Yeah, good. Bye-bye.
Bye. What a great episode. Remember, you can go to our website, enterpriseexcellencepodcast.com/downloads to download an Enterprise Excellence Big Picture map that will allow you to analyze your organization's systems in line with your longer-term vision, meaningful goals, culture, and customers. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast to help others gain insights and create a better future. There were 3 key takeaways for me from this episode. 1, think longer term. 2, analyze the systems of your organization. And 3, understand and support the journey. The first key takeaway for me came from the need for an organization to think longer term and create a vision for that future and meaningful goals. Leadership can then break out of the noise, enabling them to guide and support their reports and the whole organization to focus on what is essential and break out of the noisy day. The second key takeaway for me was the impact existing organizational systems, structures, and measures can have on culture and success in creating an innovating, continuously improving culture. Measures and structures drive behavior. Taking the time to look at an organization's longer-term vision and challenging goals, and then review existing structures, meetings, measurement systems occurring within the organization can really help. While you check these systems, the question is, are they driving the right behaviors in our people and our culture that will ultimately help us achieve our vision and challenging goals? The third key takeaway for me was the insight Oba provided Bruce. Senior leadership need to understand and support the journey. If middle management and frontline employees don't see senior leadership supporting the journey, coming to know what they are doing, achieving, and the challenges they are facing, it can quickly lose momentum. The old saying, "What interests my boss fascinates me," is so true. If people within an organization don't believe leadership is interested in supporting the changes and the journey that is occurring, it is likely to dwindle and potentially die. Enterprise excellence is not a short-term thing. It is never-ending. Leadership support and systems of work that enable this are critical to the journey continuing into the future. Thanks again for your knowledge and support, Bruce. You have helped so many people and organizations throughout your career and continue to do so. Thanks for helping us create a better future. Bye for now.